Welcome to History Curiosities channel. In this video, I'll be discussing some of the most curious events in history. From strange coincidences to unbelievable feats, these stories will leave you amazed. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. The true origin of the Germanic tribes. The Germanic tribes are the generic name given to the peoples who lived in northern Europe in pre-Roman times. For 6 centuries they warred first with the Republic of Rome and then with the Empire. His invasion of imperial territories led to the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The most important of these Germanic kingdoms was that of the Franks. It was converted into a Carolingian empire by Charlemagne, the father of Europe. Earlier, the Germanic tribes dealt the Roman Empire its most humiliating military defeat. When the Armenian War deceived and destroyed the imperial army, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, in the year 9. We are going to review in this video the origin of the Germanic tribes, how they fought, understood each other and mixed with the Romans, and how they ended up being decisive in shaping Europe. Also reviewing the main aspects of their culture, like their languages, their religion, their political and social organization and their art. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay up to date with our updates. The meeting of the Germanic peoples with the Romans. The Germans or Germanic peoples are a historical ethno-linguistic group of human communities that settled in northern Europe since pre-Roman times. In historiographical terms, they include both the towns with a strong Roman presence, who were Romanized west of the river Rhine, as the barbarian tribes who lived east of this river and north of the Danube. They were outside the limits of Rome and were involved in the Germanic invasions that caused the fall of the Western Empire. The Vikings were later protagonists of another expansive wave from the Scandinavian peninsula where all these peoples originated. It ranged from the Atlantic coast with the Normans to Byzantium and the Russian steppes. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, a variety of Germanic peoples settled in the former imperial territories, including Swaves, Vandals, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, Franks, Germans, Ancas, Saxons, Lombards, and others who would help shape medieval and later modern Europe. Visigothic Franks and other Germanic ethnic groups mixed with the demographically dominant Roman population. Others became the basis of the populations of Europe today, such as Nordic, Scandinavian, German, Austrian, part of the Swiss, Faroese Islanders and other German-speaking groups, as well as the Dutch and Anglo-Saxon population. In Eastern Europe, the Germanic peoples clashed with other ethnic groups such as the Slavs and the Magyars. In the midst of its expansion across the continent during the final centuries of the Western Roman Empire and the Middle Ages, there was also a fusion with the Romans in the religious field. By the 11th century all Germanic peoples including the Scandinavians were part of Christendom. Germanic, Teutons, and Germans. Throughout history, various names have been used to identify the original ethnic groups of Northern Europe or their descendant peoples, including Germanic or Germanic, Teutons, Germans, Tudiscos among the best known. The first to use the Latin words Germanos or Germani in the plural to refer to the Germanic peoples was Julius Caesar. It appeared in his book Comments on the Gallic Wars published around 50 BC. It is possible that the word Germani is a Celtic voice that could mean neighbors as well as men of the woods. This was in allusion to the great forest density of almost the entire territory of Germania. From about the 10th century, Latin literature began to use the word Teutonic. They used it to refer to the eastern part of the Carolingian Empire. Name from the Teutons, a Germanic people defeated by the Romans in the year 102 BC. However, in Spanish, the terms Teutonic and Teutonic were generically associated with everything Germanic or German. The word German itself, the one most often used as a synonym for Germanic. It originated in a more restricted context, that of the Alemanni, a group of Germanic tribes that settled from the middle course of the Elbe River towards its mouth. The term Alemanni appears to come from a Germanic phrase meaning all men. In the modern German language, the German demonym is a derivative of an old Germanic root meaning town. The first battles between Rome and the Germanic peoples. The first testimony of the contact of a European from the south with the north of Europe dates from the last third of the 4th century before Christ. When the Greek explorer Epictetus supposedly sailed through the Strait of Gibraltar, he reached Britain and recognized. When the Greek explorer Epictetus supposedly sailed through the Strait of Gibraltar, he reached Britain and recognized part of Scandinavia. On the other hand, the ancient Greek texts do not mention anywhere with the name of Germania any people with the denomination of Germans. They referred to the northernmost Europeans as Gauls. The first clashes of the Romans with the northern tribes occurred when the barbarians entered Gaul. The Romans did not face armies but entire peoples. Although it was Julius Caesar who first referred to them as Germanic. In the year 112 BC, the army of the Roman Republic was defeated by a coalition of barbarians. 7 years later, the Republican army lost 80,000 men in another battle. However, part of the barbarians chose not to invade Italy, moving towards Hispania, while the rest of the barbarians remained in southern Gaul. The barbarians were expelled from Hispania by the Celtiberians and returned to Gaul in the year 103 BC. They allied again with the barbarian people to attack the Romans. The two armies decided to split up to attack, which ended up being a big mistake. The Romans crushed the Teutons. The other army did battle with the Romans but lost 60,000 warriors including their king. The victories of the Romans pacified the Germans for almost 50 years until Julius Caesar started the Gallic Wars. After crossing the Rhine River, the Swabians had expelled the Celts who requested help from Rome. Going Caesar in the year 58 before Christ, with the secret desire to annex Gaul to the Republic. The Roman general again sent the Suevi across the river. In 55 BC, other Germanic tribes crossed the river and were again expelled by Julius Caesar. He thus raised a bridge over the river that he used 2 years later to attack his enemies. Although the Germanic evaded it. The Great Humiliation of Rome by Arminius. The Roman expansionist policy continued in the midst of the conversion of the Republic into an empire. In the year 9, Rome suffered one of the greatest military humiliations in its history. In September of the year 9, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest was fought in the northeast of present-day Germany. in which an alliance of Germanic tribes led by chieftain Arminius annihilated the Roman army. Rome almost totally lost the 3 legions it put into combat. His defeat was made more painful as Arminius was a Roman citizen, and led the imperial army under guile. After this catastrophe, and despite the Roman reprisals, Rome ended up giving up its desire to conquer the territories east of the Rhine River. Being established the limit that for 4 centuries would mark the border between the empire and the peoples called barbarians. Thus, the provinces of Germania Superior and Germania Inferior were definitively delimited on one side, to the west of the River Rhine under Roman rule, and on the other side the Germania Magna not occupied by Rome. Over time, the knowledge of the Romans about the Germanic peoples increased, and around the year 80 they were classified into 5 confederations. In the year 98 some 40 Germanic peoples were named, and by the year 150 it was increased to 69 Germanic peoples. The Marcomannic wars that pitted the Roman Empire against the tribes in the 2nd century increased contacts between Rome and the Germans. The end of the legions brought the end of Rome closer. Between the years 235 and 284, Rome fell into a military anarchy known as the Crisis of the 3rd century. Started with the death of Emperor Alexander Severus and ended with the accession to the throne of Diocletian. This chaotic period of the empire was used by the Germanic peoples to expand to the south, west and east. At that time the Germans numbered perhaps about 6 million, and some 200,000 advanced south and west into Roman territory. But pressured by their own demographics, close to 1 million Germanic people also migrated east, to the spaces currently occupied by Ukraine. In the Levant region of the Roman Empire, Germanic pressure came from the Visigoths or Western Goths and the Ostrogoths or Eastern Goths. The Goths advanced south of the Danube River and obtained a series of concessions from the Roman authorities. In the year 376, Rome granted the Germans an agreed emigration. But these felt cheated and dedicated themselves to looting. Even the Goths defeated the Eastern Roman Empire in 378. The Roman army was annihilated and Emperor Flavius Julius Valens was killed in action. This battle was also historical for the military doctrine of Rome, since it was the last one based on her classic legions. When the predominance of the cavalry over the infantry was already manifesting itself. The victory of the Goths in Andrinopolis forced to the Emperor Theodosio to grant them a treaty. This treaty allowed their settlement, which led to an impregnation of the East Germanic with Roman culture. The Goths adopted Christian Arianism, and many of them even became Roman citizens after being considered barbarians, even ascending to positions of importance in the administrative and military hierarchy. Even so, the partial acculturation did not become assimilation, and the conflict never disappeared. In the year 410 the Visigothic King Alaric I sacked Rome, taking legendary loot. Another aspect was the transition from the Old Age to the Middle Ages through the Germanic peoples. Massive groups of Vandals and Suevi along with Alans, a non-Germanic people of Iranian origin, crossed the Rhine in the icy winter of 406. The Roman chiefs of the time, faced with the impossibility of dominating them, resorted to subterfuges such as giving them a status of settlers and dressing them with a supposed mission of protectors of the borders. The would-be settlers immediately made it clear that they were invaders and advanced unhindered into the wealthy Roman provinces of Gaul and Hispania. The Vandals went further and crossed the Straits of Gibraltar and took over the African provinces, becoming a threat to the western Mediterranean sea routes. Rome had to turn to the most Romanized Germanic, the Visigoths, to regain some control in the western provinces. Rome's allies defeated the new invaders but only to establish themselves as the new power. Then an unexpected new actor entered the scene, the leader of a mysterious town or alliance of towns barely known to be pushing west. Attila harassed Byzantium, which was barely able to contain it, then continued westward, sowing terror as it passed through Europe, but was defeated in the year 451. Thanks to a circumstantial coalition of Romans and Germans. With Attila out of the game, new waves of invasion occupied territories that could now only nominally be called Roman provinces. In the year 476 the Western Roman Empire ended in vegetative existence as the Vandals had seized the rich African provinces. But even the last century of Imperial Rome's existence in the West had been marked by various leaders of Germanic origin. Flavius, a general of Vandal origin, was the key figure in the reign of Emperor Honorius between 395 and 423. Flavio, probably of Godo origin, was the most influential figure in the Western Empire between 433 and 454. His military genius strategically defeated Attila. Flavio governed de facto the empire, coming to proclaim 3 emperors between 457 and 472. Romulus Augustulus was the last emperor in the early 6th century. The Franks seized Gaul, displacing the Visigoths, pushing them towards Hispania. The Germanic peoples had dictated the end of the Old Age and were preparing to shape the Middle Ages. In this way we come from the Germanic kingdoms to the idea of Europe. Starting in the 5th century, several Germanic kingdoms settled or consolidated in the territories previously belonging to the Western Roman Empire. The longest, most influential reign of a Germanic people during the Middle Ages in Europe was that of the Franks, which began in 481. From the year 800 it became a Carolingian empire with the accession to the throne of Charlemagne. Charlemagne extended the Frankish domains by incorporating a large part of the Western and Central European territories into the Carolingian Empire, endowing them with political and religious unity. For which he is considered the father of Europe. What was the first text in a Germanic language? Undoubtedly the range that most identified the Germanic peoples was language. However, although the ancient Germanic languages were similar to each other, the Germans spoke different variants. Although they apparently shared a common ancestral language, when they advanced towards the interior of Europe, they already spoke in several dialects. His known written history began with his encounter with the Romans. The first known text written in a Germanic language, Gothic, was a partial translation of the Bible made in the 4th century. We hope this video has been useful to you. If you have anything to add, please share it with us in the comments section. Like this video and send the link to your family and best friends. This way they will also know more about the true origin of the Germanic tribes. If you are new to our channel, don't forget to subscribe. We'll be back soon with more curiosities from history.